Welcome to the deep dive. It is really great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'm really looking forward to this one.
So today we're exploring a detailed review of Charles Duhigg's incredibly influential 2012 book, The Power of Habit. But we aren't just doing a standard text summary. We're specifically focusing on the audiobook experience.
Right, which is actually a pretty crucial distinction here.
It is,
Yeah.
because consuming this kind of dense, psychological information audibly, it actually changes the way you process it.
It totally does. The medium really dictates the message in this case. And honestly, taking this journey through audio challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom we hold about our own behaviors.
So true. I want to start by asking you, the listener, a question. Have you ever tried to force a major change in your life using just pure willpower alone?
Oh, the classic trap.
Exactly. Say you wake up on January 1st and declare, that's it, I'm a completely different person now. I'm waking up at 4 a.m., I'm running 10 miles, and I am never looking at a carbohydrate ever again.
And then maybe 3 or 4 days later,
You find yourself right back where you started, and you're incredibly frustrated.
we have all been there. I mean, it's the classic trap of relying purely on motivation.
Right. And that is the core promise of the research we are diving into today. This isn't about, motivational speeches or hyping yourself up in the mirror.
Yeah, no hype here.
It is about understanding the actual hard science of why we do what we do, and more importantly, how to change those patterns without relying on sheer force of will.
Establishing that baseline is just so important because if you look at the landscape of typical self-help books, they often lean heavily on emotion. But Duhigg is a reporter by trade.
An investigative journalist for the New York Times.
Exactly. So he approaches the topic of human behavior not from the perspective of a life coach, but from the perspective of a researcher looking for hard evidence.
He's following the data?
Right. The material relies on neuroscience, clinical psychology, real corporate case studies, and documented personal transformation stories. Because of that journalistic foundation, listening to this doesn't feel like your standard productivity guide.
No, it feels like investigative journalism.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's get right to the foundational concept of Duhigg's entire thesis, which is something called the habit loop.
The core engine.
Yeah, the engine driving our behavior. And he breaks it down into three very specific sequential steps that happen every single time a habit plays out. Most of us know what a trigger is, but he maps this into a three-part loop: cue, routine, reward.
And that sequence is completely non-negotiable. It always happens in that order.
Right, so step one is the cue. That's the trigger, the specific thing that tells your brain to...
Automatic mode.
Exactly. It could be a time of day, an emotional state, or a specific location. Then step two is the routine. This is the behavior itself, the action you actually take, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional.
The thing you actually do.
Right. And finally, step three is the reward. This is the benefit you get from the behavior. It's the payoff that helps your brain figure out if this specific loop is worth remembering for the future. So cue, routine, reward.
But truly grasp why this matters, we have to look at the physiological why behind those three steps. Duhigg highlights that habits aren't just abstract psychological concepts floating around in your mind.
Or physical.
Very physical. They are actual neurological shortcuts. When you repeat that loop over and over, the behavior physically forms in a very primitive part of the brain called the basal ganglia.
Wait, the basal ganglia. So what exactly is happening in there?
Well, the basal ganglia is essentially responsible for taking complex behaviors and making them completely automatic over time. Think about when you first learned to drive a car.
It was terrifying, right?
It took immense concentration to check the mirrors, press the pedals, steer the wheel. But now, you probably drive to work without consciously remembering the trip.
I just zone out entirely.
That's the basal ganglia taking over. Your brain is constantly looking for ways to save effort, so once that structure recognizes the cue, it just runs the routine on autopilot.
So if the basal ganglia just completely takes over, does that mean we literally have no conscious control once a habit is wired in? Like, is it entirely automatic?
Consciously, it feels automatic. You can try to fight it with willpower, but the neurological pathway is already paved.
And that brings us to the biggest revelation from Duhigg's research. When we realize a habit is bad, say eating junk food when we are stressed, our first instinct is usually to try to just obliterate it.
We try to go cold turkey.
Right. We try to just stop doing it, delete the habit completely. But the science shows that the power of habit change isn't in trying to remove or delete a habit at all. You actually can't do that once it's wired into the basal ganglia.
What's fascinating here is the strategy he provides to navigate this. Because you can't simply delete a habit pathway from your brain. The golden rule of habit change is substitution.
Substitute?
Right. You must keep the exact same cue, and you must keep the exact same reward, but you have to replace the routine.
So you're essentially hijacking your own neurological loop.
Precisely. You acknowledge the trigger, let's say it's 3:00 p.m., and you feel a slump in energy. You ensure your brain still gets the benefit it's craving at the end. Maybe that's a brief distraction from work and a quick boost. But you swap out the behavior in the middle.
Instead of walking to the vending machine for a candy bar,
You walk around the block or chat with a colleague. Same cue, same reward, completely different routine.
here's where it gets really interesting. Because understanding the loop in theory is one thing, but seeing it play out in the real world is another. Duhigg transitions into these incredibly powerful real-world case studies to show this science in action.
Moving all the way from the deeply personal to the massive commercial scale.
Yeah, the progression is great. Let's start with the personal transformation. He shares a story about a woman who managed to completely transform her life. She quit smoking, she started running marathons, she got promoted at work.
A total overhaul.
But the crazy part is, she didn't try to fix everything at once. By focusing on changing just one single foundational habit, which in her case was exercise, it triggered massive overarching life improvements.
He calls that a keystone habit.
A keystone habit. It created this undeniable domino effect where getting the exercise habit right naturally spilled over. Once she started exercising, she naturally wanted to eat better. Because she was exercising and eating better, her focus at work improved.
She didn't have to force those secondary changes.
Right, they just followed the keystone habit.
That domino effect is a crucial concept for individual change. But Duhigg doesn't stop at the personal level. He takes these exact same principles and applies them to the corporate world, detailing how massive companies use our habits against us.
Or at least for their own commercial benefit.
Exactly. Take McDonald's, for example.
We all know fast food is engineered, but he goes into the actual mechanics of it.
He does. McDonald's doesn't just sell burgers. They design incredibly predictable, finely tuned systems based entirely on customer routines. From the uniform architecture of the stores to the specific phrasing used by the employees at the drive-thru.
Everything is engineered to act as a cue.
Everything. And the reward is heavily engineered too. The specific combination of salt, fat, and sugar delivers a very precise, chemically designed reward to your brain.
They are literally leveraging the basal ganglia on a global scale.
They want the cue of seeing those golden arches to automatically trigger the routine of pulling over, driven by the brain's anticipation of that precise reward.
And if McDonald's is leveraging it in plain sight, the next example he brings up is almost spooky because it happens entirely behind the scenes. He dives into the famous example of Target.
Massive retail chain.
Right. Target used incredibly sophisticated shopping data to successfully predict customer pregnancies.
Which sounds like science fiction, but it's really just data mining applied to habit loops. Target's data miners realized that women in their second trimester suddenly changed their buying routines in very specific ways.
Like suddenly buying unscented lotion, right? I remember that detail.
Yes, unscented lotion, large bags of cotton balls, specific vitamins. They assigned a pregnancy prediction score based on these subtle shifts in routine.
Wow.
They tracked the tiny, seemingly insignificant changes in purchasing, and their systems were so good at identifying these shifting habit loops that they could literally figure out a customer was pregnant before the customer's own family knew.
Which led to that famous incident where a father complained to a Target manager for sending his teenage daughter coupons for baby clothes.
Only to find out Target's algorithm knew she was pregnant before he did.
It's just a staggering example of predictive marketing. It showcases the immense, almost intimidating commercial power of tracking habit data. Target identified the shifting cues and routines and then immediately sent coupons to cue a new routine.
Buying all those baby supplies specifically at their store.
Exactly. But Duhigg pushes the analysis of habits even broader than commerce. Habits aren't just personal, and they aren't just corporate. They actually shape entire social movements. He specifically cites the Montgomery bus boycott as a prime example of this.
Most of us know the historical facts of Rosa Parks and the boycott. But Duhigg looks at the hidden mechanics of how that boycott was sustained for over a year.
Because it wasn't just raw daily willpower from thousands of people deciding to walk miles to work every single day.
Right, willpower would eventually run out.
Hmm.
Duhigg explores the difference between strong ties and weak ties within a community. Strong ties are your close friends.
The people who know you personally.
Yeah. They might support a boycott initially because they want to stand in solidarity with you. But that alone doesn't sustain a citywide movement for over a year.
Because you need the rest of the community people who don't necessarily know you to keep participating.
Precisely. And that relies on weak ties. Weak ties are essentially peer pressure, social expectations, and community routines. The movement sustained itself through the intentional creation of new social habits.
Like organizing carpools.
Carpools, the way churches organize meetings, the way the community publicly supported each other, these became deeply ingrained community routines. The social expectation became the cue. It shows that understanding habit structures can literally shape history.
It's wild to think about a civil rights movement being analyzed through the exact same behavioral lens as a McDonald's drive-thru or a morning running routine.
But that's the underlying thesis of the book. The basal ganglia doesn't differentiate between a profound social movement and a craving for French fries. The physical mechanism of the loop is exactly the same.
Now, I want to shift our focus to how to consume this incredibly dense, fascinating information. As we mentioned at the start, this deep dive is specifically focused on the audiobook experience of The Power of Habit. It's about a 10-hour listen.
10 hours is a substantial time commitment for nonfiction.
It is, but because Duhigg is a reporter, the narration is done in this clear, conversational, journalistic tone. It doesn't feel like someone reading an academic psychology textbook at you.
It actually feels like you are listening to a high-end documentary series.
And that dictates how you process the information. There is a really helpful comparison to be made between reading the physical book and listening to the audiobook.
If you sit down and read the text, you get very high scientific clarity. You can study the diagrams of the habit loop, you can easily reference previous chapters.
But it requires active effort.
Very active. You really need to be taking notes or highlighting to get the most out of it.
Right. Whereas the audiobook is highlighted for being highly accessible and heavily story-driven. Because the core concepts are woven into these rich narratives, like the woman overhauling her life or targets data miners, it allows for much easier passive learning.
You can absorb these profound conceptual ideas while you're commuting, or cooking dinner, or running errands. The stories just wash over you, and it ends up feeling very inspiring.
But to make sure we are giving you a completely balanced perspective today, we also need to bring up the drawbacks of the audiobook format. No medium is perfect.
Yeah.
First, because the habit loop is the core thesis of the entire book, there is some noticeable repetition of that concept. You are going to hear the words cue, routine, and reward a lot over those 10 hours.
A lot. In a physical book, you might just skim over a paragraph that repeats a concept you already grasp. But in an audiobook, you are strapped in for the full ride.
You can't just skip ahead easily.
Right. That repetition is a double-edged sword. It cements the concept, but it can test your patience if you've already grasped the mechanics. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly, the audiobook format doesn't lend itself well to advanced optimization or step-by-step implementation.
Yeah, if you are looking for a worksheet at the end of every chapter, you won't find it here.
Which leads right into expectation management. If you were approaching Duhigg's work looking for a highly tactical productivity manual, something that gives you a strict 30-day regimen to follow, you might actually find yourself a bit disappointed.
It's not a quick fix guide.
No. The real value of this material is foundational. It's designed to fundamentally change how you view your own behavior and the behavior of organizations around you. It isn't a rigid step-by-step formula for how to wake up early or organize your inbox.
So, what does this all mean? How do we take all these stories about the basal ganglia and Target's marketing algorithms and 10-hour audiobooks and actually apply them to your daily life right now?
Well, even though this book was published back in 2012, its insights are deeply relevant to our modern struggles today, perhaps even more so.
Oh, definitely.
Think about the landscape we navigate now in 2026. We are dealing with incredibly sophisticated social media algorithms designed to hook our attention. We have constant productivity struggles with remote work blurring the lines between home and office.
Complex personal health goals, rapid organizational changes. Every app on our phone is basically a habit loop engine.
Exactly. In every single one of those arenas, Understanding how habits form and how they are manipulated by outside forces is the absolute bedrock of making any real progress or taking back your attention.
So let's distill this down into the final core takeaways for you, the listener.
Mhm.
The big things you need to walk away with from this deep dive. First and foremost, willpower is inherently limited.
It is a finite resource.
The science proves it. Your basal ganglia doesn't care how motivated you feel. It cares about the neurological pathway.
The second major takeaway is that your environment matters far more than your motivation.
Mm.
If you want to change the routine, you have to manage the cues around you. You cannot rely on just wanting it badly enough.
You have to architect your surroundings.
Right. To support the new habit loop. If you want to stop eating junk food, you don't stare at the cookies and try to exert willpower. You remove the cookies so the cue never triggers the routine.
And the third major takeaway. Small changes create massive domino effects. You don't need to reinvent your entire life by tomorrow morning.
Just find that keystone habit.
Exactly. Just like the woman in the case study, finding that one keystone habit, whether it's a 10-minute walk, making your bed every morning, or tracking your spending, can trigger a cascade of positive changes across everything else you do.
Which brings us to the final verdict on the material itself.
Right. Looking at the consensus on the audiobook experience, it earns a very solid rating of 8.8 out of 10. The conclusion is that it is clear, it is practical, it is beautifully story-driven, and while it might not be a flashy, quick-fix manual, it is deeply, deeply useful for anyone trying to understand human behavior.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the fundamental truth we are dealing with is that our brains are constantly, endlessly looking for ways to save effort. They do this by creating these automatic loops in the basal ganglia.
And as long as those loops remain invisible to us,
We are simply reacting to cues in our environment, whether those cues are placed there by our own past choices, by McDonald's, or by Target.
we are just running the code.
Exactly. But the moment you understand the mechanics of the cue, the routine, and the reward, you step outside the loop. That understanding is the very first step to reclaiming agency over your own actions.
You move from being a passenger to being the architect.
You can start to observe the trigger, recognize the craving, and consciously choose a different routine.
I think that is an incredibly empowering way to look at it. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering thought to ponder on your own as you go about your day. We talked about the revelation that massive corporations like Target use our habits to predict major life events by tracking our data.
It's everywhere now.
Building on that, think about your own daily environment. What hidden habit loops might your smartphone, your favorite social media apps, or even your workplace currently be mapping out without your knowledge?
Oh, they are definitely mapping them.
They absolutely are. So ask yourself, what cues are they sending you through notifications or design? What rewards are they promising your brain? And more importantly, now that you know Duhigg's framework, how can you use this knowledge to take the steering wheel back today?
How can you substitute the routine they want for the routine you want?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the loops around you, keep exploring, and most importantly, stay curious.